It's James Gray. I'm a representative from the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton's organization. I got down with the network in order to be able to make change in the community, give back to the community, and prove that it is possible for African Americans to be successful, to be great, and to achieve. Before I got into activism and connecting with the community, I was already successful, extremely successful actually. I became the youngest black television producer to ever produce a TV show on NBC. I was an international commodities broker, making a lot of money. I was executive in the music industry, and I thought that it was all about making money and being successful. But at the end of the day, if you're making all this money and you're so successful, and the people around you in your community are suffering and they need guidance, that money doesn't mean anything. And for you to not reach back out to your community and try to empower your community is, beyond sin. It's blasphemy. I mean, I just really had to step back and think about our future and our children. Right now we're at a detrimental state. Gun violence is at an all-time high. Poverty is at an all-time high. Homelessness. I can go on and on, but one of my big things is anybody can talk about the problems, and that's what a lot of politicians do. That's what a lot of so-called leaders do. And I started to come up with some solutions in order to talk about how to create more jobs, how to get more people to vote, how to get, how to combat some of this gun violence. My good friend Jimbo, he's a representative from Guns Down Life Up. We collaborated on a lot of different events, a lot of different situations that were giving 70% of the guns that come into the black community are coming through by way of means of even police authoritative organizations that allow this to happen. There's a lot of situations that are going on that affect the black community that we actually have no control over, but we end up being the victims. And this is coming from the horse's mouth. Like, I'm pretty sure everybody out here has experienced some level of gun violence, either to a family member, to a friend, or in some capacity that hits you directly enough to understand that this is something that needs to stop. Okay? And just talking about it is not enough. People talk. I talk all the time, but as I said, I'm not gonna talk unless I can come to you with some means of combating these issues. For instance, a lot of people complain about different issues involving housing, but at the end of the day, how many people are actually understand the politics of legislation? How many people understand what exactly the person that you voted into office can do for you? People tell you go vote, go vote, and then you vote, and then some people don't. But even if you do, you don't even totally understand the potential of what this person can do for you. And after they get your vote, a lot of times they don't care. So I'm raising more awareness about the vote, and not only the vote, but understanding how it could directly affect you in a positive perspective. There's just too much going on in the black community that we have no control over. We don't own anything. I was just talking to a friend of mine, and he was telling me that Bob Johnson was probably one of the few black people that actually owned a major television network. Not even to mention radio. We've lost about 70% of our radio stations in the last 25 years to major conglomerates like Clear Channel. And these are means of communication that they're able to control in order to make money off of you. You see what I'm saying? So we have to be able to get back on our game and recoup our resources. We have no voice. We barely have any leaders that can, even step up to the plate. The National Action Network is actually one of the organizations that I've seen that's made dramatic change in the last 30 years. And a lot of people, they say, oh, you know, Reverend Al Sharpton is. I've seen single-handedly how this guy has fought for legislation that has made changes in the communities in Harlem, Queens, Bronx, Brooklyn, all around. And some people still are brainwashed from the media's version of what they want you to know and understand about certain things. The media is another form of brainwashing, in case you guys don't know. The media has a massive control. They can put something on TV right now that's absolutely not true, and you'll believe it without even doing your due diligence about it. And that's very detrimental. You know, I don't think that enough people understand how detrimental that is. They call it propaganda too, you know. But we're suffering from a vast array of sicknesses, mental, physical, spiritual, I mean, across the board. And it's really about time that we wake up. And the reason I'm saying this is because when President Barack Obama is not in office anymore, you're going to see a lot of things change. And I know firsthand about some of these changes because I'm dealing directly with politicians and legislation. They're trying to get rid of everything that we think we have. Okay? First of all, they say African Americans don't even pay enough taxes to be relevant in society. And if you understand what that means, the IRS is not even a government-controlled entity. It's an outside entity that has stake and interest internally in the United States government. So, there are a lot of things that they're able to do that you don't even know about. And if they say, okay, you owe taxes, you pay, they can send you to jail, they can do a lot of different things. But when you're not paying taxes, you know what happens? If you decide, okay, you know what, I'm not going to get no job, I'm going to hustle on the corner. Okay, this is how the prison economics structure is created. In order to make sure that we're going to get our money with or without you. So when you're locked up in jail, the number that's on your shirt is a number that's literally traded on Wall Street every day. And money is made off of every human being that's sitting in a prison right now, or a jail. And that's the definition of livestock. Okay? You in a bed, in a prison, somebody's making money off of you because you're a commodity. The prisons have been privatized to the point where there's independent entities that have a stake of interest in you being in prison. And there's actually, as I was talking to someone earlier, there's actually a survey that they do with these children in elementary school. By the time a child is in 3rd grade, they know whether this child's going to end up in prison or not, depending on their functionality up until this point. So their objective at that point is to get this child on some kind of medication, Ritalin, and all these things that they're giving these children in school. And the average parent's like, I'm not letting my kid take any medication from the school. But they give them a check. They say, oh, we get a check if the child gets medication? Yeah. And they say, okay, give them whatever you got to give them. That check that they get allows the education system to involve them in a medicational process that's going to change that child's entire life. Whatever they said he was diagnosed with is what he's going to get once he takes this medication. Okay? So any parents whose children are on medication prescribed by the school, or if somebody ever told you that your child cannot function on a regular basis, can't pay attention, can't sit still, I'll tell you the reason why that is. Most education curriculums do not even challenge our African American children enough for them to pay attention. Okay? If you understand what I mean, these young black children have the heart of warriors and the intellect of brilliance, but they take that away from them and try to put them into a system that's already failed them. I know people in 9th, 10th, 11th grade still reading on the 3rd, 4th grade level. How can you possibly, answer why that's happening? You see what I'm saying? So we got to bring it back We got to ask questions. We got to develop our own process. We need to create our own schools in order to monitor how the system is going. Even if you have to homeschool your children, it's detrimental now because they're not getting the proper education. Touch on some black history, because I'm beyond a lot of things that I do. I'm also an African American historian. One of the reasons I got into African American history is because there's not enough black children that know their history. They might tell you about Martin Luther King, they might tell you about Frederick Douglass, you know, but they're not going to tell you about Carter G. Woodson, you know. They're not going to tell you about Benjamin Banneker. They're not going to tell you about Cheikh Anta Diop. These are people that have, you know, created opportunities and ways and means for us to be able to maneuver outside of the system and be independent. You know what I'm saying? When I mentioned Cheikh Anta Diop, this guy was very powerful. He was a world-renowned Egyptologist that proved that Africans made it to the United States before Christopher Columbus did. But they don't want to tell you that, and they cover this up in the history books all the time. You know? But if you really think about it, it was a process of indoctrination that allowed them to steal our legacy, to steal our heritage. And once you do that, you can indoctrinate a people to substantial levels. Brainwashing. I mean, it really, sometimes you look at what's going on nowadays and you ask how it could happen. This was a process that was systematically formatted to play against a certain people. All right? If you understand from day one to now how much has been done to us, against us, you would have to understand that we have to be such a threat to some kind of people who have a stake in keeping us down. Okay? And some people act like it doesn't affect them, but it affects everybody. My second cousin was just killed by the Ku Klux Klan 2 weeks ago, in 2015. Okay, we're not talking 1965. You know, we're talking 2015. My cousin was just killed by the Ku Klux Klan, and I'm like, how could this happen? Somebody like me who's out here fighting for justice, fighting for change, going against the system, and this happens right and comes right to my doorstep. You know? So these are the kind of things that we're dealing with, and it's only going to get worse. And I'm telling you that because the times are changing, and once again, once Obama's out of office, you're going to wish he never left that place, man. Especially if we get Zeb Bush or Donald Trump, we're done. You already know what he wants to do. Everybody acts like they forgot about when Donald Trump said that the Central Park Five were a wolf pack and demonized these guys. And Giuliani jumped on his bandwagon, and that's how those guys went to prison wrongfully for over 10 years. Okay? This was another propaganda campaign that was, you know, focused on young black males. And I bet you a lot of people don't even know that the original Central Park case involved the Central Park 7. People don't even know about the Central Park 5. The reason that is because it was a lawyer, brilliant lawyer, who got 2 of the guys off automatically. He was able to say, no, you're not doing this. And now all we know is Central Park 5. That was a case that happened many years ago, and a lot of people forgot about. One of the Central Park 5 is actually a good friend of mine. And some of the stuff he told me, man, was heart-wrenching. You know, but it goes for another case in the de facto government that is totally ringed in with this whole prison economic syndrome. I just recently won a case against NYPD for unlawful arrest and police brutality. They told me that it would be impossible to win this case, especially as a young black man. But I fought this case for 2 years and ended up winning. One of the main components in this equation that allowed me to win this case was the fact that I was a black man, 35 years old, who didn't have a criminal record. That's the only reason. If I had anything on my record, it would have been impossible to win. But the fact that I won I wanted to make an effort to let a lot of young African American men see that it is possible to win. But if I could have did it over, I probably wouldn't have did it the way I did it. Not only did I get arrested unlawfully and in prison unlawfully, these cops beat me up for like a good couple of minutes, you know. But I was right. But at that time, it didn't matter. Because when a cop decides he's going to arrest you, there's a lot of times nothing you can do about that. Okay? Even though I had a police PBA card with a police badge in my pocket, my military ID, my college ID, my National Action Network card, my Screen Actors Guild card, my Musicians Union card, every form of identification that could tell you that I'm not a criminal. They still didn't care. A police officer walked up to me and said he saw me drinking a beer on the street. And I said, officer, first of all, I don't even drink beer. Well, we saw you drinking a beer. I said, okay, if you saw me drinking a beer from wherever you were to wherever you're at now, that means only one or two things could have happened. I threw the beer bottle, or I would still have it on me. She's like, oh, you a wise guy. I said, no, I just know my rights. And I know that if you can't substantiate your claim about this beer bottle, anything else you say to me beyond this point is harassment. He really didn't like that. So he kept going forward. I said, okay, you know what? If you want to be technical about this case, if I was drinking a beer in front of your face right now, there's only two things you could do about that. You could ask me to pour it out, or you could give me a $25 fine. It's not a arrestable offense, and I know this. But since you can't even substantiate the claim about the beer bottle, there's nothing else to talk about. You can't arrest me. Well, later on, my lawyer told me don't ever tell a cop they can't arrest you. I learned that. But that provoked this cop, and he tried to provoke me. Long story short, he grabs my arm, tries to put the handcuffs on. I pull back. I asked him, why am I being arrested? He couldn't tell me. I said, well, guess what? You can't arrest me if you can't tell me why I'm being arrested. So he said, oh, yeah? So he grabbed me again. I pulled back the second time, resisting arrest. I said, well, hold on. You can't go from A to C without B. You still haven't substantiated your claim about the beer bottle. That's the only reason that you're able to move forward and proceeding and arresting me. If not, you have to let me go. And obviously that didn't happen. This is the reason why, at the end of the day, after this whole case was fought, I won the case. Because I knew my rights. But a police officer who's in the wrong is going to still get the collar. He's going to still arrest you. He's going to still get credit for arresting you, whether the case gets thrown out or not. He still made that arrest, and it still counts. That's why they don't care if it's right or wrong. At the end of the day, they got the collar. And they win in that particular aspect. But if you know how to, proceed, you can eventually beat the case, rectify your name, and beat a charge. But along the process, they do count on you to allow them to get more charges on you, like resisting arrest. And all. They said that they was trying to send me to jail for a whole year for resisting arrest in a case that was totally outrageous. But they counted on me not being able to make it to court every time, which I did every single time. Don't ever miss a court date, because then they win by default, But you got to know how to deal with police. There is a methodology that the police use called command authority, okay? And command authority basically means that during the process of our communication, I'm going to have to take your respect away from you. And if you think that you're going to get it back, I'm going to arrest you. And I'm going to make up some kind of crazy charge just to justify that arrest. But that command authority allows them to provoke you, especially as a black man. That's one of the most, that's one of the biggest things they do. They walk up to you, show me some ID. I'm like, oh, why do I have to show you ID? Am I under arrest? Do you see me commit a crime? Get up against the wall, stop and frisk thing is back. What happened was they passed legislation to get rid of stop and frisk, and it died down for a minute. Just so happens that when that happened, gun violence went up. And they said, see, this is why we do stop and frisk. But if you look at the numbers, we did a survey, the amount of guns that they found in the black community did not warrant the number of arrests that they accumulated due to stop and frisk. And we had numbers to prove it. And that's why they had to back down. But now that summertime's here and everybody's shooting again, this justifies their means of doing whatever they want to do. Not only arresting people at an outstanding rate, they're killing people now. Not that they haven't always been. Now it's a great thing that we have cell phone cameras, which is something that I definitely encourage everybody to use whenever a police officer's in action. Because this is something that's not going to lie. This footage right here, we can't even rely on the cameras, the body cameras that the police have now. They've already started editing this footage when they get back to the precinct. We can't even, you know, there was a person in Cincinnati that got killed. The cop said, oh man, the camera must have went off by itself. Okay, so we can't even rely on that anymore. You know, we have to be more proactive. I remember one time I was in Westchester County. I was in Larchmont, a very rich area. And I was walking to the bus stop. There was no black people in this whole neighborhood. By the time I got to the bus stop, somebody from the community had approached me and asked me, was I lost? I said, well, actually, I'm trying to find this bus stop. I know it's around here somewhere. They said, okay, listen, somebody's going to drive you to the bus stop. Okay? And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. But I said, are you an officer? Are you an undercover? They said, no, I'm with the community, the community organization. And this is when I started understanding how a lot of these communities outside of New York City work with the community. The communities in the suburbs have the community boards, the block associations, and they have an internal policing aspect in that community that allows them to be hands-on with issues that affect the community directly. But what happens with us is when we stop doing that and we allow the police to be our direct line of defense, then they're gonna do what they do without us being able to say anything about it. And they laugh at us because they say, yo, they're not even smart enough to police their own community. They don't even have a watch group. They don't have anybody out here making sure that nobody's breaking into houses, nobody's selling drugs. They don't have anybody to do that. So since we have to do that, we're gonna do it the way that we do it. And this is another reason why I encourage block associations, community boards, and community organizations that are able to police within. By the time a police officer comes to the scene, they should be talking to a community authoritative figure in that community and asking him what happened. And he can say, this is what happened. You see what I'm saying? But when you give that power to the police, that takes away tremendously because you can't tell them how to do their job. They have a format of ways that they think is effective enough to combat violence, to combat any issue in the community. So when you give them that, they're gonna take it all the way to the bank, even if they gotta shoot somebody, because you're not doing your job. Community is very important. These kids right here, their future is at stake. Their livelihood and their safety is at stake. And we have to be able to come through for them. This is another reason why I got into activism, because our future is really going through a stage with the millennial group now. And this is one of the first generations that really doesn't have a true understanding of accountability. Accountability factor is something that measures and resonates on the level of understanding between right, wrong, and responsibility. So these are things, aspects that were always instilled generations before. And I've considered myself extremely fortunate to have grown up with my father. A lot of young black men don't have that. But this is another reason why I reach out and mentor young children. I teach children how to play the drums. I have 2 marching bands right now that are in every parade in New York City. 20 young black children that are doing great in school, you know, just being a part of something positive. I have a chess team, a chess club, a boxing club, I have a basketball team, a bunch of different outreach programs for children to be a part of, to occupy their time in a constructive manner. When we don't have those resources, you know, when I was a kid, I wanted to play the drums so bad, and when I found out that if my grades weren't good enough, I couldn't play, I stayed on the honor roll just to make sure that I could play the drums. And doing that enabled me to go from just playing drums in elementary school to high school to college to professionally on tour, 3 world tours. You know, I took it all the way. Came back here and said, okay, let me do something else now. You know, and this is how I got into the involvement of the community and activism and giving back. We are, like, I can't stress it enough, how much of a detrimental state we're in. And this goes back. I don't know if anybody remembers the COINTELPRO that was done by the FBI in the late 60s, early 70s. Basically what the FBI did was they targeted organizations like the Black Panther Party. You know, and I did a speech about 2 months ago, and somebody in the audience asked me, why was the Black Panther Party such a hated organization? And the reason is because the Black Panther Party was one of the few organizations that was providing food, clothing, shelter, medical. These guys were providing resources. Whenever you're able to provide resources to a community that is totally independent from the government, you are a threat. You're more of a threat than somebody who's shooting somebody on the corner. You're more of a threat than somebody that's selling drugs, okay? Because these resources that are being provided to the community without the government is what helps us to be self-sustainable. And if we realize how to be self-sustainable within ourselves, within our community, then we wouldn't need them, okay? And then they wouldn't be able to subject us to what they do. All right, so when you're providing resources, there's a bunch of organizations that are not a threat. They'll never be a threat because they don't have the capability to provide those resources. You know, and I encourage people to become a threat, provide resources, give back to the community, start to open up doors and provide what the community needs to be self-sustainable. You know, the COINTELPRO not only targeted the Black Panther Party, but what they did, it was a systematic approach. The Black Panther Party had got so organized that they said, listen, we're not going to allow no drug dealers to sell drugs in our community. They went after the drug dealers, and literally they had shootouts with them, they beat them up, and ran the drug dealers out of the community. And you know what? The FBI could not believe it. They said, oh my God, that worked. They got rid of all of the drug dealers in this community. So then the community saw what they was doing, and they got down with the Black Panthers. And they were so united at that time that the white man and the FBI said, yo, the Black Panther Party is public enemy #1. Then when they started doing their research and finding out we got the right to see them walking through the neighborhood with guns on legally, they even approached them several times to tell them, oh, you can't do that. They had documentation showing how they were able to legally carry, okay? This is other forms of legislation that they're slowly trying to take away from us. There was a time in the 1700s where if you didn't own a gun, you could be put in jail. I know that sounds crazy, but that was when we were at the downside of that is the FBI systematically exterminated the Black Panther Party. I mean, there's political prisoners still now in jail after 30, 40 years that never ever getting out. Even President Obama can't save these guys. It's a whole nother level. But like I said, providing resources is something that, you know, allows us to be self-sustainable. And I can't preach about that enough. How bad we need that. How bad we need resources. How bad we need outreach. You know, and this is something that, you know, could create jobs too. Now, everybody's talking about the problem. Like the 700,000 residents of New York City who are unemployed, right? And everybody's always talking about the job issue. How do we get jobs, and all this and all that. Well, there was a white man, I forgot his name. He came up with he did a survey, and the survey said that if you have bad credit, you're more likely to steal from your employer. And he had some numbers to back up that claim. Well, what happened was, this was enough for them to say, wow, if somebody has bad credit, they're more likely to steal from our company, which is a means or reason to justify why I shouldn't hire this person? Ooh. So anybody black that got bad credit, I can use that as a reason not to hire them? Yes. So this is something that's going on now, and it's crazy because it's true. Just imagine this. You go to college for 4 years. You up to your neck in student loans, which gives you bad credit. So now you come to get a job. You're like, listen, I just came out of college. I need to make money in order to pay back my student loans. But they said, look, man, you got bad credit, and we can't hire you because you have bad credit, which makes you a risk, a liability, more likely to steal from our company than somebody without bad credit. So you go to McDonald's, flip burgers for a couple of years to start paying back the student loan. By the time you're done with that, there's somebody that came fresh out of college without student loan debt and knows the same thing that you knew 3 years ago, and you're 4 years out the loop. You still get denied that job at that point. You see what I'm saying? Systematically, this is set up to be a certain kind of way. Not even balanced, not even for you to have the option to survive. You got to understand something. We are maneuvering in an environment that was created without us in mind. And if you let that resonate, you would understand that a more profitable approach to your survival in this environment would be to create your own circumstances, to become your own boss. This is something that's not encouraged, not even by colleges. College is a business, in case people don't know. Okay? I know many people who have masters, even doctor's degrees, that can't even get a job right now. So that's not always the solution. You also got to understand this. In order for you to make $1 million, your boss got to make 2, IRS got to make 1. That's $4 million made, and you don't even get 1. They taxing you on that $1 million. When I understood that back in 2000, which was my resolution, was I'll never ever work for anybody again after that, because that doesn't make sense. Okay? I mean, I know that the IRS got to get their cut, but if you want to be technical about it, the IRS doesn't really deserve a cut. Those 700,000 unemployed people are suffering because there's people from outside of New York City that have city jobs. And like I said, I'm not taking anything away from anybody, but what you got to understand is this. Long Island, New Jersey, Connecticut, Philadelphia, all of these places have residency laws saying that if you're not a resident of this city, you cannot get a city job. New York is the only one that does not have that. If we regulated New York City residency law back to the way it was, then there would be enough, there will be more jobs available, especially for people who are eligible to have city jobs. We're not even talking about felons or anything like that. There's enough people who can literally, legally work a city job and just don't have the opportunity because people from the only time when slavery is legal is when you're convicted of a crime and you're incarcerated. And at that moment in time that you're incarcerated, you're no longer, they're trying to pass legislation right now to make resisting arrest a felony. And if they do that, I really hope they don't. If they do that, because, a felony is like the real mark of the beast. I don't wish that on nobody.
Cops will lie. They lied on me, and I couldn't believe they did that. But they don't want to look bad either. You know what I'm saying? And once again, this is another thing I want to do, and I've been doing, is teaching a lot of these young children how to deal with police officers. I've seen police officers come up to a child and just start tapping his pockets, because you got to understand this too. the average police officer plays the laws of averages. If I walk up on enough young black males, 9 times out of 10, one of them's going to have a warrant, one's going to have weed, one's going to have a gun, one's going to have something. And if he runs before I get to him, I know he got something. Ships went over to Africa to get slaves, right? There was a port off of West Africa that they mainly came out of. All these slave ships came out of like one of the biggest ports and would go to the West Indies, to North America, South America. Every single hurricane that has ever been in existence literally came out of that, started where that port where the slave ships came out of, right? And only touched land on ground where slavery was involved. And that's a fact. Okay? And this is when I you know, I just couldn't even, I did the research on it too, and it's true. And that could only be like ancestral drums are beating, which is one of my slogans, but it's literally ancestors' way of, you know, getting back at those who were involved with the slave trade. Now, the president of Ghana in West Africa did an international broadcast in 2008, and what he did was a public apology to African Americans. And believe it or not, when I say international broadcast, the United States was the only place that didn't see this. And it's funny because it was directed directly toward us. The president of Ghana gave an apology for their ancestors' involvement with the slave trade. And this is big. Now, not only did they apologize, they said they want to give free land and citizenship to every African American. And it's been going on. There's people who heard about this and went out there and got free land and everything. So,
Ghana?
Yeah, you can go to Ghana right now and get that. And I know some people that have. But the thing is, they didn't even. It was the only way I found out about it was from a documentary. You know, and then I did some research on it and found out that it was true. Just the fact that we got a public apology after all these years is, you know, that's better than nothing. Although we're still fighting for reparations, which is, you know, of course, the reason why a lot of people are not still alive now. We ain't gonna talk about that. Thank you for your time. Thanks, Stephanie, for bringing me out. My cousin, Corporate Tone, Bob Promotions, my manager, and I do a lot of panel discussions and speaking engagements. But my primary objective is to reach the community and reach as many people as I can about issues. I want to thank you guys once again for your time. And anybody that wants to follow me online, I do have a Black History campaign called 365 Days of Black History. And basically, for the last 7 years, chronologically, I've been documenting African American history facts. For instance, on this day, August 22nd in the year 1950, Althea Gibson became the first African American woman to ever, the first African American person to ever play professional tennis. Now she broke grounds in 1950 so that Serena Williams can do what she's doing now. You know, that took place today in the year 1950. So every single day, if you look on my Facebook, Instagram, or any of my social media timelines, you'll see a Black history fact of the day that's relevant to that day at some point in history where a black person made something monumental happen.